Hi there. In this lecture we're going to have a look at an epic game encounter between Magnus Carlsen, the current world chess champion at the time of this lecture, against Vishy Anand, a former world chess champion, and also a world chess champion at the faster time controls. This is in the World Blitz Championship round 20 of 2016, this encounter. Magnus plays d4. We see knight f6, we see bishop f4, d5, e3, and now c5, c3. This is a very trendy battleground to start off with. Knight c6, knight d2, and here we see e6. So Vishy is not bothering to attack b2. White is well designed for that attack. So e6, very interesting. Knight gf3, and now bishop d6. You can see that black is interested in that strategic central square. There was a study by de Groot which kind of came to the conclusion that it wasn't necessarily the enormous calculating ability of the stronger players that set them apart from the weaker players, but it was often their kind of keenness for the central squares. They paid more attention to central squares, and here there is a battleground of central squares here in this position, especially e5 and e4. And for the moment, this bishop retreats. The London system bishop retreats. So we have this staring contest between the two. And black actually castles here. And here is the move that I find very theoretically interesting. It's a move which maybe in some ways you might think is a little bit counterintuitive. But in other ways, it's a bit like a reverse ŋnʉs move. The move is bishop b5. I'm not sure, you might not be aware of the ŋnʉs, but the ŋnʉs is an opening with black that often bishop b4 is used to control the e4 square. It's used to help control the e4 square or double the pawns. And even when you double the pawns, when they undouble, you often get mighty knights on the weakened squares. So there is a possibility of playing it like a ŋnʉs here, doubling black's pawns, and it also helps control the e5 square. If we look at other alternatives, you might think bishop h4, we've alluded to this resource before, it doesn't really work very well here in this position. C takes, to try and nudge the bishop back away from the e5 square. Black can refuse that and even accept double pawns here. This position is nothing for white to celebrate. Black gets in e5, and black in this particular position has a big advantage there. So you can't do that cheeky bishop g5. Bishop h4. And also, bishop d3 is the classic plan, which maybe Vishy Anand had prepared for this game. And there's a marvellous Michael Adams stem game with b6. It shows that black can try and fight for the e4 square like this after bishop b7. If white plays f4, in some respects it could be argued, oh well, this is a stonewall attack with the bishop outside of the pawn chain instead of c1, but you've compromised e4. And there is a classic game example where Sergei Karyakin really got mashed actually with the white pieces from this position, because look at black's maneuvering around the e4 square. This is, remember what I said about de Groot. Black is totally focused on e4. Adams is a super positional grandmaster, one of Britain's leading players for many, many years, maintaining a 2700 rating for a huge number of years. And one of the the things about Michael Adams, he's a very strong positional player, and definitely he knows how to torture if there's a hole in the position. And this position is at least equal here. So maybe, given that Adams is also has been a second to Magnus Carlsen in certain world championship matches, no doubt, Magnus would be knowing this key stem game. It was a very high level stem game. So this is a very, very interesting alternative here at move 8. I'll definitely pay attention to. It's a bit of a ŋnʉs strategy in reverse, trying to control the e5 square, sometimes trying to actually just double the pawns. But it is connected, doubling pawns is connected to puncturing black's control over the e5 square. And here we see actually Vishy encouraging that with a6. Usually, when you're playing white against the ŋnʉs, if you play a4, it's usually an inferior line, actually. So white does do the damage structurally, and it does accentuate e5 control. And we have actually queen a4 here now. We have rook b8 being played. It's a very tricky position. There's the usual tactical issue about this staring contest. If bishop d7, huge blunder, bishop takes d6, that might happen in one of your blitz games, or bullet, or whatever. Queen c7 more sensible, bishop takes, and here queen a3 is going to be annoying, pinning that pawn to the queen. For example, here we're getting a good position with knight b3, and we're actually winning a pawn sometimes, and this is just wonderful stuff, big advantage. If instead c takes d4, interestingly, in researching this, white does well to actually accept double pawns soon themselves with a key move in this position. I wonder if you would even consider it here. I'll give you 100 positional points for this next move. What would you play in this position if you had it? So you've kind of given black a potentially bad bishop, locked in by its own pawns. You've got potentially a nice outpost square on c5, but the queen is the guardian of the c5 a little bit. So there's a key move here, which is very nice. What would you play? Okay, queen a3. Yeah, actually it doesn't matter about accepting double pawns here. The key thing is you've exacerbated black's weaknesses, and especially that c5 square is a fantastic outpost square. So overall, despite having double pawns in this variation, the neural networks, etc., think white's definitely with a small advantage here. You've definitely got a nice outpost square, which you can use to torture the opponent with. And later, with careful play, you can contest, the b file if needed. So it's a nice advantage there. So these variations, they demonstrate this kind of Nimzo Indian in reverse strategy. It's got some bite to it. And Vishy plays rook b8. We have now queen a3 in this position. So pinning that pawn, it can't take because of the d6. We have bishop takes g3, h takes. And now c takes d4. But just like in the Nimzo Indian, even if when you double the pawn, sometimes you do get knights, which are mighty knights, taking those, weakened squares. And here, c5 and e5 are kind of vulnerable. We have a5, white castles, queen b6. And now b3, bishop a6. Here in this position, if a4, there's nothing really to fear. White can take with either the queen or the pawn even. There's nothing major to fear here, because of things like knight b3 coming up, holding pawn. It doesn't matter about the bishop having a diagonal there. So bishop a6 immediately, though, and the rook moves. The knight moves here, and now, you might think, hold on, isn't this a bit passive, knight d7? If knight e4, then white can just take and go here, hitting c6. And if here, then knight d7, this position, even if it doesn't win the exchange, we get this huge, huge knight on that weak square. The knight is better than the bishop inside in this pawn structure. So this is a big advantage. If we go back, so instead of knight d7 and look at rook fc8, then knight e5 here is interesting. There's actually a key move here. I wonder what you would play in this position. It does seem to disturb the balance and definitely put it in white's favour. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here for 100 points, what would you play in this position? Okay, you've got a very big mighty knight on e5, and you want to emphasize its d7. So g4 is very logical here to threaten g5 to kick the knight away from d7. And if h6, it seems as though white can actually, in what I've researched from this position, can actually generate a strong kingside attack, undoubling these pawns. But not only that, when a pawn is missing from the king's shield, especially the h pawn, it's often actually decisive. It's not just a micro downside. Any missing pawns around the king are often more than a micro downside. And I'll just give you one variation. If black wasn't doing anything, well, it's difficult for black to have counterplay in this position because of the bad bishop. So imagine white had a few moves. White could just build up an attack on the h file, like double rooks, and it's kind of irresistible. But yeah, the attacking initiative is definitely there. Even if black was doing stuff, black would, you know, have to be desperate to avoid this kind of build-up. That h-file is just there for the taking. So this is a very, very dangerous line. So anyway, here, knight d7 was played. But now Magnus pounces in with queen d6, looking at c6 and the knight. After queen a7, yes, he just takes this pawn up. And this is a disaster for black. After rook c7, it's a total and utter disaster. So a4, white controls, dominates the position, is now winning basically further material. After rook c7, it's winning further material. If either queen b8 or queen b6, the same, rook takes d7 is protecting the queen. So queen b8, rook takes d7, protecting the queen, getting two pieces for a rook, which is usually very, very good news. And here, Vishy resigned. So what do we kind of get from this game philosophically? It seems, and you know, one of the classic treatments is often to celebrate having f4. I have to say, the cold reality is there are some important stem games where black makes use of the e4 hole. Magnus is acutely aware of this implication, positional implication. You know, from one of his seconds, from a super grandmaster, Michael Adams stem game, I believe, you know, uses the bishop b5 to contest instead white's control of the e5, and it's a kind of reverse Indian strategy mode. It's sometimes good to use ideas in chess in reverse to refactor your opening knowledge. So in fact, in this way, you know, collecting ideas from different openings can sometimes help if you want favorable transpositions to ideas you've seen elsewhere. You'll know, oh, that's a better version of this. This is a better version of this. This is a bit like a reverse Indian, this kind of better version. Especially with a6, it's as if, just like the Indian, even if they undouble the pawns later, you get mighty knights quite often in Indian. So this is information that I know from a reverse, you know, Indian defense, and I'm sharing with you here. This looks like Indian classic strategy for helping control and fight for a key central square, as well as inflict structural damage. It's well worth adding this to your bow, not just what I'd call a classic treatment of knight e5 f4, the classic stonewall in reverse with the bishop on g3 instead of on c1, but you have the whole on e4. So that might be lacking in scalability when you meet stronger and stronger opponents. But this method seems very central square aware, bishop b5 instead. So I hope you'll be crushing your opponents using bishop b5 here. Doesn't matter if they're GMs or whatever. I hope this scales up to meet the opponents you face and to guarantee you a solid positional start to the game. Okay, thanks very much. Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed my free sample lecture, and you might want to check out my course, Kingscrusher TV/London system, and that is with a discounted code. So this is a great course with approaching over 850 students, nearly 848 at the time of this recording. So this covers everything that can be thrown at you when you play the London system. I've covered all the main kind of system replies from black, including even outrageous moves which you might have to face as well in the final chapters. So quite a lot of content here, over 20 hours of video content, approaching 21 hours, 124 lectures, 13 sections. So everything you want to know about the London system. It's a very good opening in terms of cost benefit for getting a position you can play with, a solid position, and you can spend more of your time on chess working on your tactics and your end games as well, instead of wasting your time maybe learning tons of sharp opening theory which might never turn up. So with the London system, it's kind of ironclad guarantee. You know, you can use it in your games with white, and you know you can get a safe position with the white pieces without too much fuss, and you can improve other weak links potentially of your chess understanding, like spend time doing tactics training, endgame training, etc. So it's a great thing in my view in terms of improving your chess generally, even though some critics might argue, well, you don't get a variety of pawn structures. That's not true. This system tells you how to adjust the standard triangle depending on what the opponent does. So you do get, in fact, an experience of different pawn structures if you want to be more ambitious and use the recommendations of this course. So I hope you check it out. Thanks very much.